So we should keep this in mind today, in our modern age, when we are following the Vinaya. This is the main purpose. So, according to my own personal opinion, we should not follow the Vinaya just blindly, or every single word, single letter of it, because it's not possible. Because the Vinaya was made 2,500 years ago. If we follow it rigidly and blindly, it's not possible, because we are living in a different age. And also, when Buddhism was being spread to other countries, there are cultural differences, which are very different from India, and also the geographical difference. A lot of the Vinayas were made, we have to keep in mind that it's in India, and it was 2,500 years ago. They have their social, cultural background that does not apply to the other countries, and it does not apply to our modern world. So we have to use our judgment. What I mean by judgment is that we have to have right understanding and the right view. I think this is the most important thing when we follow the Vinaya. Of course, we should not follow blindly, nor should we change or discard the Vinaya just for our own conveniences. So right judgment is very important. And to follow the middle path, not going to any extremes. This is taught by the Buddha. The Buddha himself had advised his disciples that if they go to a new place, to a different place, they should follow all the rules and regulations of that place, even though the rules themselves were not made by the Buddha. And on the other hand, whatever rules that were being made by the Buddha, if it's not acceptable by the people or by the local people that you just arrived, then you should not follow it. Because as the member of the Sangha, what we are doing is that we have to live within the community, not as a separate entity, not as a separate group that does not blend into the community. So we have, again, to use our judgment. About following the Vinaya, I would like to give some of my personal opinions or bring up some points about, say, for example, the 8 important rules that the Buddha laid down for the nuns or the bhikkhunis when he first accepted Mahapajapati into the Sangha. Personally, I feel that because at that time in India, women, they don't have any rights at all. They are very, low down according to the social, they have a very low social status. And I think these rules, these 8 important rules, were made by the Buddha not to discriminate against women, but to protect them, because that was the situation of the society at that time. So he has to make up those rules so that the women Sangha will be accepted by the community as a whole. So, as our chairwoman talked about yesterday, that, for example, the first important rule is that a bhikshuni, even if she's ordained for 100 years, she has to make prostrations, pay respect to a monk who's ordained just even 1 day. I agree with her that we have to respect anybody who's respectable, not just any old person. So I do feel that today, in our modern world, we have to do some reformations or make some changes that is acceptable in our time. and according to our cultural differences. See, when Buddhism was being introduced to other countries, to Sri Lanka, to Thailand, to Tibet, to China, to Japan, to Korea, they all took on their own changes. That is why we have such a rich, such a diverse traditions just within Buddhism itself. When you go to Tibet, you can see that difference. When you go to Korea, you can see that difference. When you go to China, you can see that difference. That is because Buddhism was a very adaptable religion. It's not something which is rigid. And it is very wide open. It is very accepting of other cultures, of other religions. They never reject, Buddhism, or Buddha taught us that we are not to reject other people's beliefs, other people's cultural practices. So when Buddhism was introduced into China, gradually there were some reformations about various aspects about Buddhism. During the Tang Dynasty, a very famous Chan master called Bai Zhang, he made up, because Buddhism started slowly developed in such a way that it had attained its own Chinese aspect. And so he made up special rules that would suit the monastic life in China. And those rules, they were very important to the Chinese, because it could help the Chinese to accept Buddhism in a better way. And those rules have been followed by the Chinese Sangha ever since. So I do feel that we, in this modern age, I think maybe we could do something about reforming the Vinaya. Not in such a way as to totally disregard what the Buddha had made, but to adopt it in such a way that is acceptable now. Say, for example, about Uposatha, reading the Pratimoksha Vinaya every 2 weeks. I personally feel that, well, maybe to some people it is very important. It has some sort of a spiritual meaning for them to read them every 2 weeks according to the Vinaya. But I myself personally feel that it does not have any meaning to me if I just read it and most of the rules does not apply today. So maybe we could change this format, this reading the Vinaya, in such a way that maybe we could, the whole of the Sangha member come together every 2 weeks, and maybe we will discuss about what have happened to us during these 2 weeks, what sorts of problems we face, and how should we solve these problems, instead of just reading the Vinaya. So maybe we could discuss on this afterwards. You could discuss among yourself. And also say, for example, the observation of the rain seasons. The reason why the rain season was established in Buddha's time was because in India, during the rain seasons, it rains a lot. And so there were a lot of insects that comes out, and because during Buddha's time the Sangha members, they have to go from place to place to beg for their food and things like that. And out of compassion, Buddha feels that if the member of the Sangha have to go out and walk, they might step on those of the insects that is killing, and also it's not convenient to walk out every day in the rain. So that's why he decided that the Sangha, they should stay at a place and observe the rain season. I personally feel that maybe would it be more beneficial for the Dharma if instead of observing these rain seasons that we use this time to spread about the Dharma, especially for those who come from the West, that there are not too many members of the Sangha. Maybe there's only one bhikkhuni in West Germany. If she spent a lot of time just observing the rain season or whatever, then she has so much less time to spread about the Dharma. So I personally really feel that maybe we should consider our time and our place and use our own judgment according to right understanding and right view and do our things for the sake of Buddhism, for the sake of spreading Buddhism, for the continuation of Buddhism, instead of just being rigidly following what were we supposed to be, what were we supposed to do. So I think this the few points, my personal opinions, that maybe I hope you could discuss more on it.
Thank you very much, Venerable Yung Kai. Yes, one more point from Jampa. We all get so involved.
I just wanted to correct. I'm not the only bhikshuni in Germany. There are some Vietnamese bhikshunis in Germany, but they don't speak German, so I can't have any relationships to them really. But there are some Vietnamese bhikshunis. One has already for 30 years kept her roots in Vietnam, and she's a boat people, so from a refugee. But well, out of this province of language.
I'd like to also respond, now if I can remember what it was I wanted to say. Oh yes, you had mentioned, for instance, the special changes which are laid down very clearly in Vinaya for monks who lived in different areas where the rules had to be changed. This occurred several times. May change the lesser rules of the Vinaya. You do not have to keep them all. But Ananda, in his grief, failed to ask, what are the lesser rules? For which he received terrible censure. So, at the very first council, a few months after the Buddha's death, Ananda mentioned this, as they were reciting the Vinaya and the Suttas and these sorts of things. And they said, Ananda, what is it? And he said, I don't know, I didn't respond, I failed to ask. So they debated. And they could not agree what were the lesser rules, and that is why we have all of the rules we have today. Only because they could not come to an agreement. You see. So they thought, well, it's safer, you see, if we take all of them, because then people cannot fault us. You see, that's always the problem. Are we going to be faulted by everybody? So I think that's important to remember. The Buddha laid that down. The next thing is that in regard to the 8 special rules for bhikkhunis, some of those rules cause a great deal of difficulty in the West, particularly the first one, as was mentioned. And I know, with no question in my mind, that if those 8 rules are followed rigidly, Buddhism cannot survive. Because in the West, people have too much education to believe that the Buddha would ever have laid down a rule which would imply that women are inferior. They will not believe it, and they will not accept Buddha Dhamma. Of that I'm sure. There's no question in my mind whatsoever about it. So it's a very difficult question to deal with, you see, and I think one that takes a lot of thought of how to deal with this. And I asked back a number of years ago, again, a well-known Sri Lankan master about this very question. And his answer to me was, it is the Bhikshuni order itself which changes the rules of the Bhikshuni order, and we bhikkhus really have nothing to say about it. Now, I grant you that was a rather liberal statement. Probably he wouldn't make it in Sri Lanka. But these are difficult questions, and I don't think they can be answered right away, but I think they should be explored. And we should discuss, and we should explore, and we should look at alternatives, and we should understand. And then we wait and let it percolate and see what occurs.
Yes, few points that Venerable Yunkai gave. She emphasized very much. If you want to have any change, you must have right view, right understanding. Put lots of responsibility on each individual. That, to the extreme, could be dangerous because it means each one could do anything. And how are you going to come about this right view? So I think it's very important also that if this is going to be so, then you should observe after the ordination, you're supposed to be with your master or your teacher for 5 years. With real intense, or 10 years, intense education, intense training. Only then you can come about having the right view. And then you can come about knowing exactly what is good for an ordained person. I think that should go together. Otherwise, if you just take ordination and you're completely on your own, how are you going to come about having the right view? How are you going to come about knowing exactly what you should do? And that is one of the main points. I think now we split up into 3 groups. Now we split up for discussion into 3 groups. Each one of the speakers will lead the discussion in that particular group. Yes, and one Tibetan group.
We all know that truth. And there is a very good English monk. He's now living in Australia. And he's been working on revising the Vinaya in a form which is more modern. By trying not to make absolute changes, but by trying to make it so that we can relate to it more easily. It's an enormously long and difficult job. Right. Now, if this sort of thing is also wanting to be done for the bhikkhunis, we need another thing, a bhikkhuni expert on the Vinaya, which means someone who has really studied from forward and backward and sideways and can do that. It is not a matter of changing the whole thing. This is dangerous. It's a matter of making a difference. We are hoping that the monks' new edition will be available soon. It should be available soon. He's been working on it for about 4 years now, and it will be very helpful to us. The first one of the Guru Dhammas, the one where the nun has to prostrate to the monk who's only 1 day a monk. I've been living with that for quite some years. My personal experience is that when I was a small child, I was brought up in Germany, I was educated to make a curtsy to everybody. And that's what I do. I make a curtsy to everybody.
Well, for me, it makes me really afraid. If I hear people saying we should change Vinaya, I think we can't do this at all. That is not the solution. I become really afraid if I hear things like this, you know. I think the only thing we can do, there might be a possibility really, if necessary, to change some rules, but this can only be done by all the Vinaya masters of all different traditions in the whole world, that they do together. Otherwise, it would be the same like somebody would call himself the Buddha and say, I make just new one. You know? And I couldn't, I wouldn't practice it at all. I wouldn't accept it. And I know that many people wouldn't do it. So I can understand the good intention, you know, but I think that's not the proper way of surviving of Buddhism. Just I just want to
Okay, now we split into discussion groups.
How do we arrange
Please, there's one question here and then
Can I just make a comment?
oh, please.
Okay, firstly, we need to project our voices a little bit more because we're missing it. Yeah. And secondly, I am so happy to hear these things discussed. I've been in the Ozark Mountains for so long, just going through all the stuff by myself without any, playback, that I'm in heaven right now. Then there's, you are all the angels and the bodhisattvas. Okay, I'll just bring out a couple of points. We are walking the razor's edge, of course, in the West, which is why we have to be very careful. I agree that we should not change the Vinaya, but I think that we should definitely change the interpretation of it. When I read my precepts every 2 weeks, I do all 406, first Bhikshuni and then Bodhisattva. I find myself many times either dozing through the one. I think it's wonderful to think of having a committee on this in our international nuns organization that we're going to form. I think it's a brilliant idea, and we'll have all the input from the different traditions. And one more thing, let us be very gentle with each other in the Sangha and not have the harsh criticism from each other saying, well, do you do this, or why do you do that, or let's be gentle, because look, we're all pioneers and it's rough, believe me. And my last thing I will say is that in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, when I walked down the street in my robes, there have been many near automobile accidents, which really upsets me because I don't want anyone to be hurt because of the fact that I'm walking down the street. Most people are very accepting and wonderful to me.
Now, Kema Children and then and then Sherry. You want to say?
Well, the monastery that I'm involved with in Nova Scotia, we started something which we've been continuing to do, which I really think is good, and that is that we study the Vinaya, and we have a lot of interest in what was the actual motivation for each of the rules. And so my personal feeling is, rather than trying to come up with something written in stone that's a kind of a change, that if the Sangha in the particular monastery, nunnery, or whatever, is continually discussing the Vinaya, each of the rules, in terms of what was really the original motivation, then it's living the Vinaya. And you're not getting away from what the Buddha intended, but it's also, you don't have to be so literal. And so we every Sojang day, twice a month, we spend the whole day, because we enjoy it so much, actually discussing the Vinaya rules in terms of our own lives. So it's very live and extremely exciting, and not at all academic. So personally, I think that's the way to go.
Can I ask a question about that? About what Rima just said? Aren't Getsulmas technically not supposed to study Vinaya?
You can study Vinaya.
Everything of it? Just not the vows. That reduces it drastically.
Well, what we do, we talk a lot about the 10%. And so a lot of our discussions about that, but then those of us that are fully ordained, and we're monks and nuns together, then we discuss all the culture.
Now there was Ayasuma and then the Putin children wanted to say something.
For 2.5 years, I've been having her to do a Nan's Island, and every afternoon between 5 and 6, we've been studying the Vinaya, which is a Pali Vinaya, which we have, where the Bhikkhuni precepts are partially the same as the Vinaya. and I'm not particularly keen on having anything laughed at that is Dhamma, but I can understand why it's happening. So I found that not successful. We have, in the Pali Vinaya, we have behind each rule the story. So we read the story. So we get the story. Sometimes that's interesting and people are interested. Half the time I find them falling asleep. Then I thought, well, maybe it's too much for them, maybe I'll just... And then they start talking about, this doesn't apply to us this time and this doesn't apply to us that time. Well, it takes a great deal of thinking, and I had to do that great deal of thinking to make those things really apply to us. And they do. The interesting part of it is that they do apply to us. So I had to use my mind a lot to try and make it apply.
I think it's still very important to read all the vows of the 2 weeks. We may think that we fall asleep during them because they don't apply, but actually they do, because if you read the stories behind all these long lists of vows about how to get a look, the whole point
Jensen Tangushis, Nidiko Tenten Duna Gigiones, Kurang Davos Lapsonwa, then you catch a chivari, Munkotla, the other are not Munkotla, Lapta Savas. Kurang did Mulam to the Pujan Yam to Giala to the Panche Puchik, Zoom, Kurang Yam to Fuji, Pujas at the Dawichi Buddhist. In a Jensen Halang Gumpa Pavila Chicks, charging these Yabes. Then Kurang somebody did is, and then you also Tangan Chitang German chanting Ani Tulum Lapta Disita, which she got in the States, Jinda Chikia, and the last Paropa Gia Lagabu. The Kawasu took this, it's temple chick in the Google was. Then Kurang somebody, a Chichina Kirang to the Gishini, Telepagila, Gumpa Champu Ditsune, Muntune, Tene Anitsula, Tene Sunjinanga, the double chick. To Tulia, Jinda Chick, to the Angidam, Tene Kurang to Gishi Yapuni, Nima Rivi, Kurang to Sunjinang, then double chick suit to Club, then there is. Then catch a chivari Takarina. Chitang Tene Kurang to Gumpa Champu Ditsuyorwa, Chitang is some David Chani, Nima Rila. Nime ringla tene ani yang chabe gompa la dot shogi de injimenji tsela ringla tene had logo gri tsela ringla de shogi mari ngi ngoma la gish tu nga ba ngi gi de yorwa kurang sumba de ta chutse nishu sabji ringla dot shogi de shogi yo mari chitang tsela ringla tene logi ina tene dikcha de chabe gompa la dot shogi de yensang ngi samna kurang tene lapcha de tene ani ra tata ani nyungnu yorwa de yensang ani ma to mensa tene kurang tene Chabat Nanjin, the Dawu Luption, Jevishaji, Yapo Chicks, Yadits Kavurwa, and Adenda was Zinda Mambo Tene Tsugi Yoga Tene Anitene Zinda Jejan Tene, Chikni Sumat Mena Kalikavova, the Yensan Kanta Gutsu Latine, Anikashi Tene, making Yapo Gesha, Gesha Pass Tobiba, and Dawu Nits from Gumpa Champions in La Ducholina, Tene Yapo Resa, Yamu. Tina Kurang Lapsong, Chikchena, and Dawu Zona Yapo. Tina Yang Gumpa Champu Kempu Sukuram Sakashi Kellen. Kinangi samlang nang sila dis. It's utsuk yapshi ko. Kirang se de community le kitensen geshlang yeba de putirang de community kacha shina dit super gyatna utsuk yapchi ne de ya de ma ta regi yo le robot kirang na samle na kari.
Please forgive us for starting a little late. One of our speakers has not yet arrived, and so we were sort of hoping that we'd have all our speakers before we began. However, we will start now, and the subject for this afternoon is livelihood for the ordained Sangha. The format this afternoon will be that we will have first the talks will be given, and after that, just as we did this morning, we will break into smaller discussion groups, which seemed a very lively and good format. So we'll do the same this afternoon. We'd like to begin this afternoon with Venerable Bhikshuni Mao, Meow, as in cat, Meow Kwang Sudharma, who is from Arkansas in the United States. She was first ordained in the Soto Zen tradition in 1963 in Japan. In 1973, she took the Dasa Sila Mata, which is the 10 precept ordination for nuns in Sri Lanka. And as she said to me, every 10 years she took a new ordination. So in 1983, she took the dual ordination for the full ordination of Bhikshuni in Taiwan. After the pilgrimage tour, which comes at the end of this conference, she will begin working with underprivileged children in Sri Lanka.
Omi Tofo. This means limitless light of wisdom and endless life of compassion. And by the way, my cat says my name very well. My original intention for attending this wonderful gathering was to encourage Buddhist women, be they nuns or lay women, to eventually obtain the Upasampada, or the higher ordination, if this is what is in their hearts and minds. Somehow, the assignment came to me. Somehow the assignment came to me to speak on this panel concerning the livelihood for the Sangha. I refused several times on the grounds of being a complete failure in this area. However, my refusal fell on deaf ears. So I will share my personal experience and my suggestions in regard to livelihood for the Sangha. Before I do this, I'll try to explain how I feel about the situation of nuns earning a living in the West. It is a very sad fact that some nuns have to allow their hair to grow and find it necessary to put on lay clothing in order to obtain jobs. Many monks and nuns disrobe when returning to the States because they cannot function and support themselves there. Some sections of society show disapproval and even hostility towards the ordained. For 8 years, I had a secure job in an apothecary or a pharmacy in my hometown in the United States. When I returned from having spent a year in Taiwan and 3 months in Sri Lanka, last March of 1986, the owner of the pharmacy was secretly arranging to sell the business. I waited to be called back to work and asked him several times about my job, but without any results. Then he did actually sell the store. I tried to work for the new owners, who made it obvious that they did not want to hire me. So for 3 months, I searched for work in that small tourist town. Finally, I found a job in an art gallery that sold fine handcrafted jewelry. Oh, yes. One very hot afternoon, I noticed that the fan for the air conditioner had stopped. I went into the office to see what had happened. And I found some packaging of illegal drugs going on. And I handed over my door key to the owner. And I told him I could not work there any longer. And to please realize that he was creating great trouble for himself and for other beings by selling and distributing a dangerous, addictive drug. Dramatic. That small salary that I had been earning was my food money and also money for the cat's food. Meow, yes. So now, I have several suggestions for this difficult subject of livelihood for the Sangha. One is to be supported by family members. Two, to have income property, if you're that lucky. 3, working in right livelihood like hospitals with the elderly or children or any respectable, harmless but helpful service to others. 4, being eligible for old age pension. 3 years for me. 5, starting a cottage industry, which means making crafts like pottery and etc. However, this requires funds to start and to maintain the business, right? 6, staying in overseas supported temples in the USA. 'Where you may need personal expenses also. Number 7, which many of you follow, staying in Asia, where support is hopefully provided. Okay. To finish on a bright note, I have brought a videotape of the ordination of 1983 in Linchi Temple in Taipei. But it cannot be shown here due to technical difficulties. But I do want to encourage Buddhist women to obtain the higher ordination if they're really ready for it. As the transmission is direct from Lord Buddha's time and is definitely alive and well in Taiwan. As has been pointed out to me, this topic of livelihood for the Sangha, though it is difficult and upsetting to discuss, is important to understand. Many times when we think of renunciation, there is a rosy glow surrounding it, and there's no idea of future repercussions. And therefore we call your attention to this reality. For myself, no matter what hardships or difficulties, I am delighted to have been blessed with the great opportunity to walk in the Buddha's footsteps. And I would never consider any other way of life.
Thank you very much, Mao Kwang Sudharma, for giving such a humorous presentation of such a difficult situation. I think that's the right approach, is not be too grim, but at the same time quite determined. And I was thinking, as you were saying all your 7 alternatives, that an 8th one would be that hopefully there will be an evolution of monasteries of the different traditions in the West, in Europe and North America, where monks and nuns can live without having to pay, such has been the tradition in the East. So now we would like to introduce our good friend of the Dharma and good friend of the nuns, who's already very familiar to us and who we enjoy very much hearing from, Mr. Abhaya Verakun, the Commissioner of Buddhist Affairs in Sri Lanka, which is a very good thing that he is. So
shall we exchange these two seats? These two? Do you want mine?
Oh, he wants that microphone.
you want that one?
No, it can't go.
No,
It can't
it
go
can't.
that distance.
She could come here and you can speak on.
No. It's all right, I think. It'll be all right? Is there a problem with that?
I think he'd rather stand.
Yeah,
You
I
like
can stand.
us to stand. That's okay. She can come here and translate, and he can stand up there. Or she could just translate without the mic. Okay? Because there's just a few of them.
Reverend monks, Reverend nuns,
and friends. Sorry for the show I put on. Now, I think I also have the same difficulty, if not more, than what Sister Sudharma experienced. For one thing, the subject is livelihood for Sangha, and I never belonged to the Sangha. Even livelihood for the laity, I have my wife and children. Well, I have given all the responsibility to my wife, and I can advise that to others. It's very, very easy, and you find the dinner on the table when you want it. Well, coming back to this subject, although I don't think I should be the person who should speak on this for all the disqualifications I have given you, still I have to shoulder this responsibility. Now, this livelihood for the Sangha, let us start with the Asian countries, or rather, even confining to Sri Lanka, and let us end there, so that I don't get on to any territory that I'm not accustomed to. Now in Sri Lanka, Sangha is looked upon by all laymen. So there is no difficulty for the existence of the Sangha, as the Venerable Bhikkhuni already mentioned. But there are certain things that are expected of the Sangha. Now in the morning discourse, I think there was one speaker who mentioned that respect that are being showered upon the members of the Sangha are sometimes so embarrassing. You find that when you go about, people come and kneel before you and give you so much of honor and respect. Honor and respect to the point of embarrassment. Now, this is one main thing in this Sangha life. They are venerated because that is an essential part in their life. We refer to 3 gems. The Buddha, a venerable being, will be venerated for several centuries more. The Dhamma, the venerable doctrine that he has come out with, and the venerable Sangha, they have to be venerable. Now if that big responsibility is cast upon the Sangha. Now in Sri Lanka, for instance, we use special names for certain things that monks do. For instance, when a monk sleeps, when a layman sleeps, we say nidaganno. But when a monk sleeps, he is satapeno. When we eat, it is kanava. When a monk eats, it is valandeno. And so on and so forth. Distinction in name. Distinction in the word that we use. And there is also a distinction in the meaning. A layman can eat what he gets, standing wherever he is, and in the most odd manner he prefers to. But a member of the Sangha is expected to go and squat somewhere, sit down, very patiently be in that position and mindfully take the food. So there is a big difference in these 2 items of work, or rather one item of work performed by 2 different persons. This is the same thing even about, say, walking. Now a man, layman, he can run, he can dance, he can do anything. But a monk, when he walks about, there's a certain demeanor. People look up to him. There is something very noble in the way he moves about. Now that is something cast upon the Sangha. I think you all recall the story of Asoka the emperor. Emperor Asoka, as you know, was a warrior. He had several armies. He conquered several countries. And he was a military man. One day, while watching out from his palace, he saw a 7-year-old monk walking, and he was so taken up by the way he was walking. He knew there was so much of sobriety that was in him from the outward appearance. He sent a message to this young monk requesting him to come back to the palace. He complied with the request, and once he arrived in the palace premises or room, he was asked to choose a seat and sit down. He looked around. He saw the throne. There were various other chairs and so on. He sat on the throne. He had very good reason for this. He saw the persons who were gathered there, and he saw himself. Well, in seating, he knew there was no one else who was so qualified to sit on that noblest chair or the throne. Then there occurred a discussion between the king and this young monk, and the king was so convinced that there was something in the religion that this small boy was professing. And this was the beginning of converting a military man to a most religious man. It is therefore the responsibility of the present-day Sangha to be able to transform this disorderly world into one of orderliness. Well, I don't think I need dwell on this further and further. This small story and this particular responsibility, I think, is quite clear. Now what I want to mention is, it is this same tradition that has been brought down by generation after generation of the Sangha. And that is why when they walk about, when they take their food, when they sleep, when they do various other things, those particular acts are referred to by different names. Now, this type of act on the part of the monks, that is outwardly behavior, as well as they are being able to guide with the wisdom they have already collected from the Tripitaka, the layman, well, they have immense respect and honor towards the monks, towards the nuns and the monks, the Sangha. Therefore, looking after the Sangha is not a liability, It's not a responsibility, it's a pleasure.
아니 가수에 진중기 초월이 통제 거야 따도시야지 강하게 말해 근데 제수가 때문에 깨버 상거든.
Now if we can give this message to the laymen that it is a great privilege on their part to look after the noble Sangha, the Sangha will carry on, and there will be the Sangha looking after the laymen in their requirements and the laymen looking after the Sangha in their requirements. I believe I have conveyed my message, but if need to introduce one or two more details, I would think that, even this morning we were speaking quite a lot about the Vinaya rules, the Vinaya for the Sangha, that this is very, very important and is a very, very serious thing. This is not a thing that should be concluded after 10 minutes or 15 minutes discussion. As our sister very, very clearly said, these traditions that have come down the ages have something very sublime in them. One thing, sister, I don't know whether it is correct to call you sister or because it's correct. I must say, I was very happy to hear that message from a young nun who really thought and who really believed that there was something very, very noble and great in the tradition that had been brought down century after century up to date. If we think of giving it a revolutionary change, I don't think we would be able to go that far. Maybe in just one or two minor instances we need some changes, but then we have to be very careful in selecting where we should effect those changes. May I mention that in sermons delivered by monks, now we were speaking about laymen and monks giving sermons and teachings, talks. We find in sermons given by monks, they always refer to examples quoted in the Buddhist literature, and that literature coming down several hundreds of years. When a layman gives a lecture, he often quotes examples from day-to-day life, what happens, what happens in a particular country now, or what happened last week, what was reported in the papers. Those examples are drawn and the speech becomes very lively and is brought up to date. Our monks often resort to getting these examples from a society which we have no knowledge of. Now, but there is something very, very important. By bringing down the same examples, they do not give a twist, the personal twist that could be given. There is always a danger of our understanding something wrong and then our trying to interpret it. So what the books have recorded, if we have understood wrong, we are not going to let other people also go with that wrong notion. So they have found this conservative idea about some of these things is very, very important. And before long, I think I'll be considered the most conservative person. Even at the risk of that, I think I want to mention this because these present-day interpretations can be given verbally, but then putting them in writing is a very serious thing. You have also it's very good to always mention, well, this is how I think, without saying this is what the Buddha said or this is what the Dhamma says. Then I think I have already dwelt on this question about how people look at the members of the Sangha. Now there is also the knowledge that is contained in them, the knowledge that they acquire. That is a very, very important thing. I do not think I need mention today also what I said yesterday, how this world of knowledge is denied to especially the nuns. We have schools for the laymen, we have special schools for the monks, but we don't have those things for nuns. Now in Sri Lanka, during the last 2 years, we have been able to start 8 such classes for nuns, to which nuns travel about 20, 30, 40 miles. They come. At one place, when we were about to start that class, I asked him, shall we start this class at 8 o'clock? They said, but 8 is too early because we have to cover a distance of about 30 miles. How can we come? By public transport. By 8 o'clock, shall we make it 8:30? I told them, well, if you make it 8:30, we have only 3 hours to study. By 11:30 we have to finish because the monks will have to go for Dani. They will have to have Dani. And thereafter the classes will be for the monks. And I tried to keep it at 8 o'clock. What happened was that we found the entire class turning up by 7:30. So there is that amount of enthusiasm with our nuns to acquire knowledge. Am I too long? Now, laymen, as was mentioned in the morning also, do not have much time to read the Dhamma, to get the essence of the Dhamma. The members of the Sangha have more time for that, and what they acquire, they can pass on to the laymen, for which they will be very, very, very thankful. Then in Sri Lanka presently there is this problem. We have the monasteries as well as the newly coming up nunneries, or I don't know whether it is correct to call nunneries because they are what we call them aramas, because those aramas house only 1 or 2 nuns. We don't get nunneries with hundreds and hundreds of nuns. We rarely. But this friendliness is very, very essential. I have suggested this to many of the nuns in Sri Lanka, and I found with the practice of that, it has become quite successful. This is what I told them. In Sri Lanka, you have the system where a particular day of the month is the Dani day for a particular household. That is, on that day, that particular household provides the monks, the temple, with the necessities. Now the 30 days are shared amongst the people living in that village. I suggested to the nuns that they take one day to provide meals to the temple, on them. The nun only has to say, well, my day of Dani is on such and such a day. and you please come and help. The laymen all come, rallying round her. She only gets the leadership. All the other labor is provided, labor and material is provided by the people of the village. And more than the respect that the monk gets, nun gets. The nuns, the share of the respect the nun gets is much more than what the monk gets. Monk gets only the food, nun gets the credit for arranging the dani. And that results in the investment of saddha of these people. And that saddha is enough to look after the nuns of the village. Now, that is one thing. Then there were certain other things mentioned, I think, which we can do. A small vegetable garden grown in the arama. If possible, well, it will do something. In Sri Lanka, that is ample because you don't have to toil very much for your food. Now, this vegetable garden is not going to look after all the requirements of the nuns, but it's going to give a big message to the villagers. It says, well, this particular arama has taken some steps to collect something from the backyard, and why not we do it? Well, it's a big example given to all the other children and all the other villagers. Where it is possible, I think it is very good to create trusts, that is funds collected and invested in the banks that would look after the requirements of the arama or the nuns. This has happened in a few cases in Sri Lanka, and I think it should multiply. I should also recall that our country, in its economic development, has received friendly assistance, but massive amounts of money from our friendly countries. Most of these countries are represented here. In Asia, you get Japan, Korea. Those are the main ones. India has helped us to a certain extent. Then in the West, of course, we get quite a number. We have England, Germany, France, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, then going back to the Americas, US and Canada, then Australia, which is in more or less in the south of Asia. Now all these countries have helped us in our ventures of economic growth. If these countries can help the world community of the Sangha, a few $1 billion for US, I don't think is such a big thing. But for us, I think it'll be sufficient to look after all our nunneries and also to hold an annual congress in Buddha Gaya. There is one thing that is often spoken of from nuns. We often get people saying, why don't they go and do hospital work? Why don't they go and do this social work? Why don't they look after the lepers? Why don't they look after the very unfortunate ones? You know, I think that is where we really don't appreciate with what difficulty some of the nuns are living. Now, I don't think that nuns should go after these services until they are equipped, one, to look after themselves and to do their essential work. They have to get their education properly. They have to get their discipline properly. And they should be able to look after the people who support them. And it is only after that, I think, we should think of other services. I'm not saying that these other services are not important, but if we are too impatient to go to those territories, what will happen is we will not be equipped properly. And the Saddha that will be created in the people by seeing us will not be to that extent. Anyway, I think these are more than speaking about a particular subject, some random thoughts, and I hope I have done something. Thank you.
Said will be very helpful for the discussions that we're going to have afterwards. I'd like to introduce Shramanarika Sumedha, who first began studying Zen in the United States in 1973 in the Korean tradition. She received the 8 precepts in 1981 in the Korean tradition and took the 10 precept ordination of Shramanarika in 1983, also in the Korean tradition, and this was in the United States. She's presently studying in the Theravadan tradition at the Insight Meditation Center in Barre, Massachusetts. So now we'd like to hear from you on the subject of livelihood for Nizam.
Is that right?
That's right.
I just finished telling everybody that I couldn't possibly do this afternoon. We got in last night around midnight after 4 days of traveling from the States. And this is my first time in India. And we came cruising into Bodh Gaya last night. And even 5 sacks of flour, of whatever that straw on that bed looked really good to me at that point. And I thought, I can't possibly deal with this. I felt like I'm still trying to deal with being here in India. I couldn't come here from the Burmese Vihara and come into this and think seriously at all about the problems of nuns when I had to come through what I had to come through to get here. And so I said to everybody, no, I cannot possibly do this. And I went back to the Vihara and I talked with some people who are more seasoned Asian travelers, and they told me that what I'm experiencing is quite common. And I feel like some things have fallen into perspective for me a little bit. So if you'll forgive the fact that I really am exhausted and may not be very coherent, I'll try to say some things. I think there's one other thing I'd like to say. My name tag here says Bhikkhuni on it. And something else has become clear for me today, and that's that this is not accurate. When I looked at the rules that I would be taking, when I looked at the Vinaya rules, I realized that I would be taking vows that I couldn't keep, that I knew I would not be keeping when I took them. I was accepted for full ordination in Korea 2.5 years ago. I talked with Koreans in America, and I've been accepted for full ordination in America. But I found that I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't take a bunch of vows that I knew I was not going to keep. And I have no problem. I was really pleased to hear a lot of the things that were said this morning about the Vinaya. I agree. I really agree that there's a need for Vinaya rules, that they need to be adapted somewhat. But I just found for myself that I just couldn't take a set of rules that I knew I couldn't keep in the form that they were in. So I'm not a bhikkhuni. And what happened was that I went over through the years saying to myself I wasn't going to take full ordination, and something kept feeling incomplete for me. And finally, this last fall, I realized that in my heart there is nothing missing. That I feel fully ordained, that I feel finally like I have grown into the ordination. And I'm not sure I will ever be able to take the vows. If I read them and see that I won't be able to keep them in America. I've lived most of my ordained life in America. And there have been times when I really wanted to quit. It's so difficult to try to do it in the States. It's so difficult when there's no Sangha. It's so difficult when people think that you're just weird. It's like somebody said this morning, they are sure that there's some psychological reason why I'm a nun. And I feel like there's these people in the wings waiting for me to have some deep insight to, oh yes, I hate men, that's why. And I will come to my senses and I will give up this madness. And there are times when I look at myself and I think, well, maybe this is some form of madness. I'm not sure. But somehow I have a vision that all forms of practice need to be available in the West. They all need to be there, including the monastic form. And if people like myself, whether sane or insane, don't do it, you know, who is going to? For the first wave, it's got to be difficult. I mean, whoever said it was going to be easy anyway? The practice is difficult. It's difficult. There are many, many difficulties. So somehow I've always known too that I could never really turn my back on this. So I find myself in a situation where I can't leave the ordination, but I can't take it fully either. Where I can't seem to be a lay person. Something in me is too strong to do this. But I can't seem to embrace the traditions because I also feel that we don't have a role model, an Asian role model that really works well in the West. We are so prone, we Americans especially, to fanaticism. We seem to be so prone to looking for heroes. The middle way in America, in the West. And I can't claim to have the answers. I've really come here full of questions. I've come here hoping that somebody else might know what I'm talking about. When I say I feel like I'm in between so many different worlds. I'm ordained in the Korean order, and yet I practice Vipassana, which is done by the Theravadan tradition. I'm sort of not acceptable anywhere. At times, it has been extraordinarily lonely. But somehow I feel like if we tough it out this period, somehow some clarity will come. Eventually, things will become clear to us. Oh, this works. Oh, this doesn't work. You know. My feeling is that we have to be able to handle money in America. We have to be able to serve ourselves food. When I've seen monks come to America who insist that they can't touch money, it really ends up that they have like a personal secretary. And they can't take food that's not offered to them, so they're always served. I don't think the Buddha had in mind that we would be treated like royalty. So I haven't known where to look. You know, I haven't known what is really right, you know? What are the intentions? What was the Buddha intending? I keep going back to the Buddha. What was he intending with these rules? What was the situation in India then? What is our situation now? What is appropriate for me to do? I can't, they have a number of requirements, and if you fit the category, then you're a mendicant. And then you can come in at $6 a day, and one of the requirements is that you don't earn any money. But I have to pay them when I get there. And they have told me outright that they're uncomfortable with me asking for money there among the Sangha. It's a difficult situation. It's sort of, there's all these catch-22s kind of built in to being in America and trying to come up with the funds for doing these courses. There's a monastery in Boulder Creek, California, Tampula Sayadaw's monastery, and people have said to me, well, there's a monastery, you know. You need to be in a monastery, you know. You're a nun. Why don't you go there? But my friend Dhammapali is in Burma now. She was ordained there. It costs her $15 a day to be there. She was ordained there. So it doesn't... It's crazy being an American and being ordained. You know, anybody who wants to do intensive practice needs to be supported. There have been times when at the end of a course, I didn't have the bus fare to leave. So I would put a note up on the board, and I've done it different ways. They have these bulletin boards, you know. This is how you communicate when you have to communicate, because silence is maintained in these retreats. So I put a note up at the end, and sometimes I'd word it differently. I keep trying different things, you know. And every time, I mean, it's so bruising, every time somebody comes up to me and bawls me out, you know. Everybody else pays for these courses. Why should you be able to be here free? Why should anybody give you the money when the rest of us have to be out there working for the money to pay? There's always somebody that says that to me, and I can't argue with them. I mean, what they say is, it's accurate. But still somehow I feel that people who really want, people who have to devote their lives for whatever forces are at work to practice to the Dharma, somehow these people need support. Somehow they do need help so that they don't have to spend a year or a year and a half saving up the $3,000 that it costs to do the 3-month fall course. Maybe I'm greedy. I want to do more courses than I could do if I went out and earned all the money to pay for these courses. I don't know, I've been over this and back and forth, and I've pulled out the rules, the Vinaya rules, and I read them to myself, and I've gone and asked advice from various masters and from the Tibetans who come, and, you know, anybody who would listen to me. And finally I've come to that it has to feel right. I know what the rules are. I know I'm breaking them when I break them. I know I have to break them again and again. I know somehow I have to keep at this, and that my home is America, not Asia. And somehow the money keeps coming. Somehow it keeps coming. I feel like I can't really say anything constructive, except that I've learned that if it's right, it's not going to be the money. It's not going to be the lack of funds that will keep something from happening. That somehow it always comes, and that if we can just have faith. I mean, I've spent countless hours worrying when I was down to nothing, had no money at all. And I've discovered that the worry seems to have no relationship at all to the money when it comes. And so I can't even say I've quit worrying. There are times when I get to worrying still about it. Somehow I still believe that the answer is not to just go out and get a job. Somehow I believe that the support is going to come. I don't know what the answers are for America, or for the West. There have even been Koreans who said to me, you just get a job, you know. And to hear that coming from people in my own order, it's been difficult. I think that, for myself anyway, that if we really look into ourselves, if we really look into our hearts and into our minds, that things become clearer. And that we're going to know each step of the way what it is that we need to do in the West, what it is that needs to change. I think it's going to become clear as it's happening. And that when something's not right, when we're doing something and somehow we know it's off, eventually we're going to see that. So where my own support comes from, I would say about half of it comes from one particular person. I'm really fortunate to have somebody who's willing to do that. There's another sort of list of people who say, if you're ever really desperate, you know, call me. And there are many, many, many people who just hand me $5 and $10, you know, at the ends of the courses, and that's the way it's come. And I think that the lay Sangha in the West is learning. I think that the faith and the commitment in the West is deepening. I think that as we are starting to see that we Westerners can do this practice too, that we Westerners can meditate, as we start to see the practice working for ourselves, the faith is deepening in the West, and I really believe that as that happens, there's going to be an increased understanding of the need to support people who are willing to make the commitment to focus as much of their energy, as much of their time as they can into the Dharma, that those people need to be supported. So I don't know if any of this made any sense. I feel like I just did a lot of babbling up here, but I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much, Sister Susanna. And again, I think what you've said will be very helpful in our discussions, and will trigger off a lot of very lively discussions. So at this point, we were going to break into 3 discussion groups. 3 English and 1 Tibetan discussion. And these discussion groups will be led by Sister Sumeda, Mr. Virakun, and Sister Sudharma. So this morning there was one there, one here, one here. Where was the 4th one? Was there a 4th one? Back there, in the dirt. Okay. So we could.
Then the sound won't match. The battery's not. It's not running. Oh, it's recording. It doesn't show it here.
recording?
Yes.
Donated the all our special.
I mean,
And you have that active shell, the art special. I mean, everything. That in itself, I mean, is
monastery for monks and nuns. That so far we only have 6 ordained people, but sometimes it goes up to as much as 10. And then we also have, there are a few lay people that are like in charge of the kitchen, in charge of the construction, this kind of thing. But what we found there is by allowing people to come and do retreats, either in the house, in the monastery, within the monastery, or in the retreat cabins. Now we've built 4 of them. But that supports us, so no one has to pay that's there. And so this is working quite satisfactorily. Plus, now we're 3 years old, and when we were starting, somebody said to us, harmony of the Sangha is the most important thing. If you have harmony of the Sangha in your monastery, then everything will come together. And I always remember that because it's a tendency to get so worried about money and so worried about things that you all start quarreling out of anxiety. So in remembering that as a fundamental thing, actually now we have some major patronage and things like this that enable us to, aside from supporting ourselves, you have to do things like pay the bills and pay for repairs and expansion. So that comes from patrons. But actually now we have some major patronage and things like this that enable us to, aside from supporting ourselves, you have to do things like pay the bills and pay for repairs and expansion. So that comes from patrons. But there's one thing, which is that suppose a monk or nun wants to travel, and actually that's part of the training, is that sometimes you have to put yourself in that situation. However, it's not so desperate as what you were describing, where, in order to even practice, you have to be in such a fragile situation.
Something is... I'm sorry. Something is disturbing me about what you said, and I'm not quite sure what it I would like to answer that. If we... Somehow I still believe that if what we're doing is right, that it won't be a lack of funds to stop it. And if we get into situations where we are charging for courses, somehow to me it seems like the Dharma should be given freely.
The Dharma, the courses are without cost. Just room and board cost money. And the people can choose not to have room and board in the house. They can live in a nearby hotel and just come for the Dharma teachings. And we ask Dana for donations.
I don't know why, but, and maybe it's something I need to look at, but for some reason I haven't felt comfortable
to us all the time. It's not only as a nun. You're always wondering, how do I live my life? How do I answer? And 2 things that I felt I wanted to communicate to you. One is that I feel very firmly that the path lies within our heart. And that if you know what you have to do, you have to put up with all kinds of terrible stuff. There's no place. You're so free. Maybe every 3 or 4 days we have to go and pay for our food. When we get a handful of food, then we can practice. So it was so inspiring because our lives are not a rose garden, not for anybody. Not
for a limited number. Because 1 for sale is a Kanduguda, doesn't charge anything. And you are given everything that is necessary to you, and that's very good guidance.
You know, people have said that to me, that you're choosing this life in America. You could go to such and such a place or such and such a place. And I looked really closely at this word choice. It's a very interesting word. How much choice do we really have? I mean, I've practiced with a number of different teachers. I practiced 6 years first with a Japanese-trained American in America, and then I practiced with a Korean. I practiced with 5 or 6 different teachers. I didn't find a practice that I felt really worked for me until 40 years ago. That's after I had been practicing for 12 years. And I found a practice that works, and I found a teacher where it just works. Do I have a choice? Can I just turn my back on that?
I don't mean a conscious choice.
Yeah.
I mean the choice in terms of karma. I mean, just all my energies, my different energies, subconscious or whatever you want to categorize it, all together make the choice. If I really want to stay in India, I find the means to stay in India. If I want to stay in whatever, I find the means to stay there. So I don't complain about living in the West because I know somehow it's my choice, but in a wider frame, to stay in the West and take up the difficulties which are there and enjoy the advantages. Oh, choice.
We are living our karma. There is no choice in the matter.
First she wanted to speak and then you.
I would just...
That's very important what you said. As you were talking about, I was just wondering, see you said the monks get and nuns, they grow vegetable gardens. I mean, aren't the nuns also equally supported as the monks in Sri Lanka?
No.
Because here in India, there is equality. I mean, we are also supported by the people, as sannyasins, we are supported.
No, this vegetable garden I said for this reason, not that they're doing it.
No, this is a question only. Aren't the nuns also being supported by the lay people? Oh, that's true.
Not to the same.
Not to the same extent, but
As you said, we have some trust also. I was wondering whether it's possible for you to have a trust or something like that. Because we have in Sri Lanka, as Mr. Nippon said, some trust. I wonder if it's possible in your country to form some trust.
Some people do that.
Form a trust.
Form trust, pay money and live in
to gather an enormous amount of money.
Oh yeah. That was the question.
Yeah, in our case, a few individuals have donated. Likewise, if we can, I don't know if it's possible, we can get hold of some people who are really interested in the cause. Maybe you might.
In our country, I think we have just one word on what he said. In our country, we get very, very rich people who have very, very small families, and sometimes only the wife. And when they go, they leave the entire thing behind. And they give it to a trust and say that you do this type of business. I suppose in other countries also that is the way. If you have too much money, you don't have any children. And you can leave it. But only thing is now they should be convinced that this is a worthy cause. That message has to be put across.
We are investigating those fields, many groups do, but it's very hard to get the money together because there are always centers and projects and books, and so the money goes into other things.
Yes, and those are the accepted noble deeds. But now, if we can put this message across to them, well, this is in a way nobler than what all these things are. Well, I suppose it's not easy. It's not easy, and especially as pioneers, it's a very difficult thing. But then I suppose it's not the entire property.
Than Europe or Canada, but from what research I've done with foundations, there's over 200,000 foundations that give large amounts of money and small to the most amazing, unusual things. I mean, it's not just. And if you go to if you're in New York City, again, if you're in Massachusetts or nearby, if you go to the Foundation Center, anyone can go and research. They have people to help you. but I don't know if this would be considered making a wage, but it's a very simple formula, about 10 steps. And if you know this formula for writing grants, you can, and then know a few little rules that go along with it. There are literally thousands of people that specifically give to unusual people, like Pioneer, like in your case, might be a better reciprocal of a grant than somebody like, say, even a established or more normal. It appeals to these people. There's all kinds of people that have private funds. So I was just thinking, I'm not sure about Europe and Canada, but in America, there are so many sources of funds, and that if you can have some skill in writing, or some of your friends, it wouldn't be wage gathering, I don't think, but there is a lot of money. Even in Reagan's time, there's lots of money available.
You know, as I listen to the things that are being said, I realize that what I've gone through to do this in America has been invaluable teaching for me. Again and again and again, I have to see my expectations, or the greed, or the feeling that, you know, I'm a nun, I should be supported, you know, just the kinds of things that you were talking about. Again and again, I have to see what comes right up there in front of me. I mean, I just have had, you know, if the money had been just handed to me, it almost seems dangerous, you know?
I mean, but you could help other people. Like if one person in the Sangha had a skill, or even a lay person was willing to put a few hours into writing, they could support a lot of people. Even if you weren't concerned about your own well-being, or you were taking care of it, really could cause, I mean, or solve problems for many people that are also in your case. So you could actually serve others as well.
I just want to say that the two Indian people who spoke, you know, the tradition of supporting the spiritual life, I think in the Western America particularly, we have a tradition that almost finds immoral not to work. And I think we need to be aware of that it's so woven in that not to be income producing smacks of an immorality.
Yeah, it does, because I'm not paying the fire company that would help, you know, my cooking burning or whatever, you know.
So there's a kind of double bind.
Within Buddhist beliefs or whatever, it's still subtle there too.
Oh, it's definitely
Not
in
only
there.
subtle, very close.
Very close there at times. I mean, I feel like there's a whole bunch of my friends who breathe this huge sigh of relief if I would just sort of return to normalcy, and you know, and these are people who practice.
And it's even in my own mind. Somewhere deep down, it's I should pay for my own expenses.
That's why it's so hard to ask for money.
That's why it is. It's so
the idea of begging to be
But maybe this is what's happening, is our form of alms round, of begging. Maybe this is, rather than, you know, the kind of begging that was happening in the Buddhist time, this is our form.
That's what I was saying. That's what our teacher said, that if everything, I mean, it was coming along so nicely with patrons and everything, that he actually interjected this one place that if you want more, then you have to ask for it. Because I said, well, couldn't we, as the Abbey, couldn't we ask for people? He said, no, they should have to ask for themselves because of the, and then he said, it's like alms rounds. So.
Yes, actually that was very close to what I was going to say, that the Buddhist tradition for the monks and nuns is to make, and there is value in that. And also the other value is in learning to give. And I know our Lama is always very, in Hawaii, he's always very pointed in his discussions with our Sangha, who we're a little lackadaisical and none of us have a whole lot of money and we don't work very hard because we're in Hawaii and we don't have to work very hard. And so, but he says that you have to realize the value in giving, and that because the lamas come and we have to support them, we have to pay for their food and their lodging, and there is no question, we don't get them if we don't pay for them. And we come to realize the incredible value. And of course, this is for you also. If you persist in your practice, you could at some point going to be incredibly valuable. I mean, now you're a student and you have to beg, but at some point, your attainment, which is, but no, understand what I mean. I don't mean that. I mean that when a being of attainment comes into the community, again I'll go back to this Tibetan community. There was this nun who lived in the forest. She lived there, nobody knew anything about her. She never went out to beg, she barely ate any food. After 2 or 3 years, one man happened upon her, and he got a mo, he got a reading from her. Suddenly, he realized what an incredible being this woman was. And in a short time, the whole community was at her feet. People were, the money was just, I mean, everything. She never kept any of it. She gave it away. At that point, she didn't need it. She was used to living off one chapati and a glass of milk every day. But that's what I mean by value, the attainment of her practice. She had been in meditation for almost 20 years. So what she had attained was suddenly something that was so unbelievably valuable that everybody wanted it. And that's really what comes if we maintain the practice, if we put up with all of this stuff. At some point, we are the precious gem that gives solace to suffering beings by the attainment of our practice. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. You are. But you know, my own feeling is that one of the difficulties in the West is that there haven't been very many Western people who have attained the clarity of mind and the stature, the depth of practice of the Asians. And I think that because of that, my feeling is that until there are Westerners who have done that kind of practice, I mean, when they come along, they're going to be. I went and talked with Tara Tolku and Peshe, you must know, because I had such a hard time with this Mahayana, Hinayana, greater vehicle, lesser vehicle, you know, and here I'd fallen from the greater vehicle to the lesser vehicle. I was doing this. I was so conditioned, you know, to believe all of that. And I asked him, where are the Westerners? Why aren't there any Westerners like these Asian teachers? Is there something wrong with us? Can we not do it? Or aren't we capable? Or he says, the second wave. He said, it's the time. It takes years and years and years for a person to develop to that degree. The first wave of practitioners didn't see the need for that kind of time commitment, but it will happen. And my own feeling is, I don't know what kind of attainment I'm capable of. I used to think I knew, you know.
Yeah. Only the highest.
All I feel is that don't we have to keep trying?
Yeah.
You know,
That's exactly
what else can we do?
We have to keep trying. That is right. That's the answer, is to keep doing it. I mean, Sri Rinpoche also was asked this question: where are the women? Who's doing anything? And he said, "There's one. There's one Western woman. She's been in retreat for, I think he said 12 years or something like that."
Yeah, he told me, actually, Tara told me said also that there were some Westerners that were sort of still incubating, you know, he didn't want to say too much about them.
But at some point, it's coming.
It's coming.
And there is, I guess I didn't finish about what I was saying. The Lama kept telling us you have to learn to give. So for the Sangha, for the lay community, it's important for them to learn the value of supporting. And it's all a learning experience for us. We are just sort of trying to do something new.
But you know, I've seen that for myself. I realize that I have had these sort of intensive practice blinders on, you know. I've been just doing intensive practice and expecting to be supported. And all of a sudden I woke up this year and it's like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is intensive practice my life, or is life and the intensive practice comes out of a balanced life? You see what I'm saying? My life was intensive practice, little bits of time in between, whenever I needed to, you know, for time off. You know, that was my attitude. And all of a sudden I realized, no, wait, that's totally backwards. That your life is balanced, and then the practice comes out of that, and that I needed to be giving more. I really felt that. I needed to be connecting and giving more than I was.
Very nicely up to one comment that one of our lamas was making. Whenever we have the Sangha sit together and say, what should we do, what would be the best assessment? You know the teachings. The teachings say, wealth comes from good karma. So if you sit and think the best plans of how to make money with this or with that or with this or with that, you're missing the point. You should focus your energy on creating good karma, to be giving, to be generous, to do positive deeds, to avoid negative actions, and you create good karma, then you will get it. So focus on that one, and if you need money now, you just work in the fields and pick fruit.
I mean, you know, it sounds like such a cliche, but I've really been discovering that when you give, it just comes right around. You know, it's really true.
No, I had a much harder time accepting things that is good. it was much harder.
And if people who don't mind getting dirty could carry the mats.
Well, we had a quite inspiring discussion. It was, we were discussing how the Tibetan nunneries are usually trying to support themselves. And it seems so that the most of the support comes really from this kind of pujas from special sponsors who ask the nunneries or the monasteries for special pujas, for example, for long life and so on. And they don't have to, usually before they didn't used to give every month something for the room because the buildings were just there. But nowadays it seems so that in some nunneries they had to change that also some of the people have to give a kind of rent, I think something about 20 or 25 rupee. Well, they support themselves also by handicrafts, selling, for example, maybe incense or things like this, and doing some handicrafts at least, or maybe in some schools, I don't know if in all nunneries, but they have some kind of tanka paintings and doing some special items you need for Dharma practice. But it seems to be the problem that by doing a lot of pujas for the sponsors, sometimes there's not enough time for studies. So you see, we came again to this point of studies in our group. And you know, the nunneries in the Tibetan tradition here, nowadays in India, since they became refuges, they are still lacking of that. And so it seems so that it would be really the best to try to send us the most intelligent nuns to this dialectic school in Dharamsala, that we should try to send some of them over there to become real geshes, Dharma teachers. And that at the same time all the nunneries should have also their own teacher who can do it a little bit more slow together with all of the others. And we thought that it might be a good idea really to shorten this pujas a little bit and to try to explain to the sponsors that they are also very helpful in spreading the Dharma, not always to have this very long pujas, but maybe to do one in the morning and one in the evening, and that's it, that they have really the rest of the time free. Because also His Holiness said that he really wants to, I heard some days before, that he said that it would be very helpful to have also the kids from, for example, rich families also in the monasteries, because he believes it's better for them to go to this kind of schools like they have done before in Tibet than to go to these Indian schools nowadays in India. And he believes that the education for the kids is really better if they go into these monasteries as it was before in Tibet. So he would like to lift up the standard again, like it was before in Tibet, of all monasteries and nunneries. And they have to get this opportunity that they can really manage this. And that is always a question of money and support. But as you know, all the Tibetans are refugees. So also many lay people, they are very ill, they have TB and so on. And so it's also very difficult for the Tibetans to support, because sometimes they have by their own sponsors, because they have no income, and they still get help from many different kinds of refugee communities. So it seems so that the nuns have really to try to get some income, but it seems so that also up to now they always try to have some nuns who are not that interested in studies but doing the work, and some nuns who are really well, intelligent and everything else you need for studies, having the interest and all of this, that these nuns they try to train in good education, Buddhist philosophy and so on. And they have also some sponsors from foreign countries, from Western countries, but it seems that everybody sees very clearly that they can't manage on a long view. You know, there are always coming new Tibetan monks and nuns from Tibet, and this is also limited, so one can try to get all these different kinds of help together, but it needs also these devoted lay practitioners who see a good chance for themselves, for their own practice, to support these nunneries. Otherwise, I think they will never have the abilities to study and to practice.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, I was in a group of the Venerable Mia Sudharma. Sorry. Okay, we went on 13 points, but I will not explain all. I will just give a brief enumeration of the points. And but after that there will be 3 points who are very important, and like this I can talk about those. Well, the first point was our Venerable Ayya Khema said in Sri Lanka she has a lot of money, a lot of donation, because she teach, and the people have a lot of veneration for the work she does. And also the second point is, in the West, the lay people should have a gradual learning, should learn gradually how to behave, and what is a Sangha member and what's a Sangha person, and how in the community the Sangha person should have a place. Sorry. Also, there is the ethic. People think the lay community think it's better for monks and nuns to have very good ethic and to appear quite well, to have good appearance, and to not be sloppy, etc. I mean, you know what I mean. The fourth point, it's one point who came back very much during this discussion, is the point of teaching. The way teaching could be a very good way of earning money. But of course, not everyone in a monastery or a nunnery could teach. Then there could be other way of earning money, like doing some craft work or doing some gardening or other kind of exchange work with a lay person, like going and minding the kids or doing some kind of exchange. Also, as I said before, the education of the lay people is very important, and at this point came back also very strongly, like the way how to give dana and how to treat sangha in a community. Then also, for the part of the Sangha and for the part of lay people, each one should know his role in the community, and as an ordained person in the West. The person, as this also came very strongly, the person should have self-confidence. on the way of behaving and on the way of going out in the world and working. This point also came very strongly, is the establishing of monastic community, but not only establishing a monastic community and then leave, but establishing a monastic community and the Sangha members should stay in this community for quite a long period of time. Because if they stay there for quite some time, they give the opportunity to the lay person, to the lay people in the lay community to see we are not just a bunch of, just a bunch of people who just come there and go and come, but we are people who are really caring about what we are doing and also the way we are doing, and also to spread the Dharma and to help others in the way we do our work. Also in the same view, like the community who come to the monastery when the community is established, it's good if we put our schedule, like morning meditation, etc., work, etc. Like this, give people something to think about, and they know they can come and do some meditation and do some work or have some talk with the community. This also could be an interesting point to see. Also, the point of generating projects, many ideas were given. One from Brisbane, from the relaxation center, Corona Center, like doing relaxation or offering some kind of meaning for people to relate to us, like we said, relaxation or babysitting, or maybe teaching some brief, going to schools, going to different schools and giving some Dharma talk for this reason, for this way. We don't need to be very experienced, just to want to teach and to be willing to teach and to give some effort, because as we said, nothing comes without doing anything. Then also we should see our work as meditation. Okay, now it's finished. I will stress then the 3 points I said before, like teaching. It's a very good way to earn money. No, but people can give donations. Yeah, I greatly encourage to give donations. Then the second point is like growing our own vegetable or our own food. Yeah, but you can just you don't have to work in the garden. You can have small pots in your balcony. Just eat a bit every day. Because people, from one box you can have an ocean afterwards. Yes. And then also the point of self-confidence, because most often we don't have very much self-confidence. We thought we are thinking, oh, we cannot do that, or it's, you know, it's not for us to do that. This is was the last point, but to finish on a note with more pleasant, our Venerable Ayya Khema was telling a little joke at the end of our talk, and I would like to relate that to you if you don't mind. Well, it was about Mahayana and Hinayana, and she said, Mahayana and Hinayana are all vehicles. Okay.
Great vehicle, small vehicle.
Oh yes, I
all
forgot that.
vehicles would be